All right. Welcome into the Wednesday edition. How are we all doing? It's great to see you. It's great to be here on a Wednesday afternoon. I appreciate you being here with me. And don't forget, get over Gridiron Grubb. Follow me on Twitter at Gridiron Grubb. Subscribe here on YouTube. Hit it up on Spotify if that's what you got. Apple Podcasts. Get over there, follow, subscribe, whatever you want to do on those. Leave a 5-star review. That's what we're looking for here. I would love it if you did that for me. It would be great. I appreciate it. And that being said, you know where to find me on all of these apps and Twitter. So hit me up, get on there, look for the great content, listen to the great content, view the great content. It's all here for you. So today, what are we going to start with? Well, I'd like to start with what I'm calling our segment today is Wednesday Whistles. What is going on in the NFL with the inconsistencies in penalties? I mean, this last week now, the totals aren't this magnitude. There's been higher years. I know like in 2015, there was around, it was over 700 penalties called in the first 3 weeks. So it's not quite as many being called. It's just the inconsistency. We've had 5,548 total yards of penalties called so far this season in just 3 weeks. Like I say, it's not the amount of calls, it's the amount of missed calls, it's the amount of everything that's going along with this. That, what are we supposed to do? We don't know what a personal foul is anymore. We don't know what roughing the passer is anymore. We don't know what pass interference is anymore. It's ridiculous. There's so many things going along, and it's not necessarily all the referees' fault. The referees have so many rules now to watch, and that's what's driving me crazy. The referees have so many rules just to watch that it makes it almost impossible for them to do their job and do it correctly. So you look at this, right? So we have that, it's just the inconsistency. Like this in the Dolphins game, okay? Dolphins Raiders, there was a call before the game was over in regulation that put the Dolphins on the 1-yard line. It was a pass interference call that looked very eerily similar to this, called by that same official you can see in the background here. How does he call that on one play and then this where the cornerback dives over Fuller's back and grabs him by the arm, therefore not allowing him to even have a chance to catch the pass? Now, I don't want referees deciding football games, which this would have been pretty close to a referee deciding a football game had that call been called. Okay, I got it. I don't want that either. But if you're going to call it one way at the end of the game, you've got to call it one way in the overtime. It doesn't make any sense. It's the same official calling the same call, and if you look at the calls, they're very similar to each other as far as the plays go. So how they come about of going into this saying, well, this one's pass interference and this one's not, it's a very inconsistent job. And then we move into like the roughing the passer. How many times do we keep seeing drives be extended for some type of bogus hit on the quarterback? If there is roughing to the quarterback, right, head to head, they go low on the knees, I got it. But half the time, quarterbacks are getting hit in the thighs or the chest, and they're not getting driven into the ground, and they're calling personal foul, roughing the passer, and it's extending drives. It doesn't make any sense, and that's just where we're at. And going back into the pass interference, if you watch on Monday night the Cowboys-Eagles game, okay, the Eagles have a possession, and, well, the Cowboys, it started with the Cowboys. Cowboys have a possession. The cornerback comes up, sticks. It's actually, if you look at the replay, even in slow motion, it's a great play. He doesn't even get his arm. He doesn't even really touch the receiver. He gets his arm in and breaks up the pass as the ball's getting there, just like this. He sticks his arm in. Pass interference. Well, the Cowboys get a series, the next series, or the Eagles get the ball the next series, and the same thing happens from a Cowboys player, except they don't call a penalty. And it was even more clear of the player getting there early than it was when the Cowboys receiver, benefited from the pass interference. It doesn't make any sense. How these guys are coming up with this, I don't know. Because every week it's different. And every game it's different. If you look from one game to the next. So even in this, right, it's not just the calls that are getting called, it's the calls that are getting missed. How in the world that during the Ravens game, and I talked about this yesterday in the podcast, yes, it hurts if you're a Lion to know that this happened. But how does this happen? This is the most basic rule, pre-snap rule. There's a referee back here, the back judge, watching that clock. How does he let that happen? How? Explain that to me, NFL. That's what I want to know. How does that happen? How does this clock go to 0? And it takes a 2-tick at least before the ball snaps. It might even be close to a 3-tick. That's 3 extra seconds. I get it when they let the clock go for about, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4 of a second, half a second, and they get the snap off. I get that. But this was blatantly, horribly missed. And that's what's going on around the league. So if you look at it here, in 3 weeks, we've had 202 penalties called. That's in 3 weeks. Week 3, I'm sorry. That was just this week. 202 penalties called. Average 6.3 penalties a team. So over here you can see on the left side, and this is how it works if you listen on the podcast. On the left side, we have most penalized teams. On the right side, we have least penalized teams. The Eagles, 13 penalties in their game. The Steelers and Bengals both had 10 each. That's the same game. The referees had 20 penalties. These are accepted penalties. Accepted by the other team. 13 on the Eagles, 10 on the Steelers, 10 on the Bengals. Those were our most this week. If you look at the opposite side of that, okay, so the Steelers-Bengals, they're playing each other. So I guess you could say it's evenly officiated. However, you don't know what those calls were to make it out. Does it balance out the yards and everything? Was it personal fouls? Was it team forced errors as far as false starts, offsides? Was it those things? Well, there's some of those mixed in there. However, the rest of these are calls that the officials are having judgments of their own. They're human beings, so they're going to make judgments. They're going to miss calls. It's going to happen. But the Eagles, 13 penalties. Now, in that game, just to let you know, the Cowboys only had 4. 4 penalties. 4 called. So that's a big discrepancy in calls. Now, does that mean the Eagles didn't have a bad game and deserved their penalties? There was a lot of penalties from the Eagles, offsides, things. But there was some judgment calls by the refs that decide things. Now you look over here at the least penalized team, the Rams. The Rams had 1 penalty in the entire game versus Tampa Bay. 1 penalty. Saints, 2. So you're telling me these teams go through, and that's what I say, the inconsistencies in the league. I'm not saying the Rams didn't play a great game, but you're telling me that judgment calls like holding, pass interference, illegal contact down the field, offensive pass interference. We saw the Rams were running some wicked pick plays, right? You can't tell me that so it's all judgment calls. And this is what's happened. There's so many rules to call for an official during a game, and there's so many of them that are judgment calls. There's no way to be consistent. The only way the league fixes this is to back off some of these rules, maybe reinstate some of the rules we had before, maybe a 5-yard face mask for just barely touching, a face mask if you graze it with your fingers or whatnot. Okay, everything has to be a 15-yard penalty. Also, what I don't get is how everything the defense does gives the offense a first down. But everything the defense does, if you get a penalty on offense, some of these same penalties like pass interference, all these things, how do you gain your down back? Doesn't make sense to me, right? So there's got to be some adjustment here. And whether you like that or not, that's not what I'm here to judge. It's more about how are we going to clean up all of this mess that's being created by every time there's a play, whether it's a punt, a long run, every time there's a good run in a game, there's a holding. Every time. Then there'll be some calls that you go, how did that happen? You watch the guys get just tackled. I've watched some guys go through the defensive line or offensive line, and they're on their way to the quarterback, and guys, you can see them just grab them by the back of the jersey. No call. And so that's what I'm talking about. The inconsistency is ridiculous. And as fans, yes, when it goes good for your way, like in that Raiders game, Raiders are happy that didn't get called pass interference. However, you would know today that if that did get called pass interference, they would have been all over it, all over social media, all over everywhere, had that been called, what I say correctly. That was actually a pass interference where he grabs his arm, pulls it down before the ball's there, makes contact with the receiver, doesn't allow him a chance to catch the ball. That should be the essence of pass interference. However, the one they actually called at the end of the game against the Raiders, it almost looked like incidental contact as the guys were going for the ball in the end zone. So, maybe the game doesn't get to that point. Maybe the Raiders win in regulation. But if you're going to call them, you got to call them consistent, and there's got to be some type of consistency in how these things are being visualized and called by the officials. It just blows my mind. I don't get it. It's out of control now, and everybody knows it. Everybody's witnessing it. So whatever your beliefs are, which way it was, if it benefited your team or didn't benefit your team, we've got to clean it up because it's going to happen next week that's going to be payback against your team, and you're going to be pissed. You're going to be pissed. If it happens this week, the Raiders lose because of some call like that, that fan base is going to be very upset. If the Eagles game, right? Cowboys, Eagles. If that was the opposite way, right? The Eagles got the call, but the Cowboys didn't. Cowboys fans going to be pissed. It's the same thing. And as a NFL football fan, it's got to get cleaned up. It has to get cleaned up. We all enjoy this game, whether it's your team or that team, the tuck rule, the not tuck rule, the sack, the roughing the passer. They've all got to be the same and consistently the same. And they're not, from referee crew to referee crew, from game to game. It's just not the same. And it's really, really watering down the sport for what it should be. Just my opinion. I love this game. I wouldn't do this podcast. I wouldn't do this video if I didn't love this game. But it's very upsetting to watch what's happening in this manner. So moving along. This is another thing I talked about yesterday that I'd love to talk about today is rookie and young quarterbacks. The way that people have gone about this, looking at rookie and young quarterbacks as if they're supposed to come out of the gate and be Joe Montana, Tom Brady. Tom Brady wasn't even Tom Brady. Joe Montana was not Joe Montana. Steve Young was not Steve Young. Peyton Manning was not Peyton Manning. Okay? None of these. Eli Manning had a 0 passer rating, QBR rating in a game when he was a rookie. Tom Brady, they won Super Bowls early in his career. His defense and his kicker really, really did a lot of work to make that happen, and the coaching. So this new concept of these guys are supposed to come out and be young rookie, just phenoms, is not going to happen. Justin Herbert's situation, I talked about this yesterday. The dude was the missing piece of the whole entire team. They have a whole entire team built. They have defense, they have offense, they have receivers, they have an offensive line. He was the missing piece. These other teams, Bears, Eagles, Dolphins, even the Patriots, they don't have a lot of weapons. The Jaguars, I mean, come on. These quarterbacks can't be expected with garbage around. So I'm going to this with Joe Burrow. We're going to start with this, right? So this is his season so far. 53 completions on 75 attempts. Okay, that's got him at 70.7% completion rating. Okay? So this, by the way, is one of the best quarterbacks as far as that going on this season. He's got 7 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and he's only got 640 yards passing. I hate to tell you guys, even though he's only thrown 75 passes, so let's be honest, that's where that's at. But he's got 105.4 passer rating. He's got a QBR rating of 105.4. It's really good. Okay? This is his second season, somewhat. He had some experience last year, but he blew it up out of the gate. Okay, this is one of those rookie phenoms, right, that we saw last year. Is he doing good? Yes, he is. Do you see the comparison here? So this is what I want to say. So then you move into Justin Herbert. Now he's thrown 126 passes this year. He's completed 88 for 69.8 completion percentage. Okay, now his yards are what are great. 956 passing yards. The dude's almost thrown for 1,000 yards in 3 weeks. That is incredible. However, his passer rating, 97.8. Okay, so it looks good, right? We're looking good. However, he only has 4 TDs compared to 3 interceptions. If you broke that down through the year, after taking it 3 weeks at a time, right? And he got 17 games this year. That's only a total of 22 touchdowns and then a total of 17 interceptions. Tell me at the end of the year, if Justin Herbert had 22 touchdowns and 17 interceptions, you would say, man, Herbert really, digressed in his second year, right? It just doesn't make any sense, right? He doesn't. He's not. He looks good out there if you watch the football games. Now, this is what I want to go into as far as that. So remember those numbers that we just talked about, right? Well, here's Jalen Hurts. He's thrown the ball 97 times, so more than Joe Burrow and less than Herbert. He's got 64 completions, which has led to a 66% completion rate. Not too bad, okay? Just under Burrow and Herbert. However, he actually has he's thrown more yards than Burrow, 780, and he actually has 5 TDs compared to 2 interceptions. His 2 interceptions came this last game. That's pretty dang good, okay, with a QBR of 99.2. So he has a better QBR than Justin Herbert through 3 games. But he had a bad game against Dallas. San Francisco, came in with a different defense. Of course he had a great game against the Texans. The Texans' defense was just below average stinky on week 1, okay? And they weren't ready to play. Look at this. So let's move into Mac Jones, right? Now he's thrown almost as much as Herbert, 120. So he's thrown 6 less passes than Herbert, completed 81. He has a 67.5% completion average. So let's go back and look at this. So Justin Herbert, 97.8 passer rating, 69.8% completion rating. Again, 67.5% for Mac Jones. That's not that big a difference. However, where Mac Jones is failing is he's thrown 2 TDs to 3 interceptions. But that's not, again, a lot of this is not on him. If you caught a podcast I had during the offseason, I knew Jones was going to become the quarterback from early on in the summer. Most people can say whatever they want to say, but I had listened up what was going on in Patriots camp. I knew how much Belichick was loving what was coming from Mac Jones as fast as he picked up the playbook and all the things that were coming with it. So I just kind of knew this was coming. However, if you listened to a podcast I had before the Cam Newton news broke about him getting released and Jones becoming the starter, I said Jones should be the starter. I didn't know they were going to release Cam, but Jones should have been the starter, and he was going to have some problems. He has what is called happy feet in the pocket. It causes problems. But the only way for him to get better is to practice and to play. So the only way he's going to get better is to do that. He's not going to have perfect games. It's going to be a lot on the Patriots defense for that team to be successful this season. If the defense doesn't show out, they're going to struggle because Jones is going to have some struggles, okay? But he's going to be a good quarterback. The kid has all the tools and he has the smartness, but it's going to take him some time. Tom Brady took him a few years. Before Tom Brady mastered that Patriots offense and mastered his game, it was 5-6 years. Think of that. When you go to a school, when you go do something, it takes years to master that subject, to master that game, to master that sport. These quarterbacks aren't going to come in. They were great at college level. They showed great potential. But when you play with the best of the best, it's a different scenario. So then we go into Trevor Lawrence. Right now, he's got 118. This is actually the worst of the quarterbacks, of the young quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence, 118, 64 completions out of that 118 attempts. 54%, 54.2, let's give him the 0.2 to make it feel a little better, completion percentage. Not going to get it done in the NFL. That is not. No. But he's thrown for 669 yards. Now, he's thrown 5 TDs, but he's already thrown 7 interceptions. Now, you can go back and look at this, but Peyton Manning's rookie season was terrible. Terrible, right? He had a ton of interceptions compared to his touchdowns. Look, man, it takes time no matter how good you are. I don't care if you're, again, like I said, Dan Marino was one of these phenoms like we were looking at with Burrow and Herbert. He came out, the game clicked, the passing game clicked. he went forward pretty quick. Now, what I'm pulling up here and I have on the screen here is a comparison to Josh Allen. I want you to look at Josh Allen's numbers for his second season. This is 2019, the first 3 games in. He had 103 attempts, 66 completions, 750 yards, 3 TDs, 3 interceptions, 66% completion average. And I couldn't, because there's so much calculations, I just did his complete 2019 QBR, which was 85.3. 85.3. That was the entire. If you look at actually his first 3 games, it was going to be worse. It's going to be closer to the 70, 80 to probably 78 range, okay, in those first 3 games. So you got Jalen Hurts, who is killing it compared to Josh Allen in his second year. He's killing it. You have Jones, very compatible with what you're seeing from Josh Allen. Now, again, Lawrence, he's struggling. He's on a team. What I don't trust about Lawrence, and I feel bad for him, is I don't trust Urban Meyer's whole outlook of NFL yet. Urban Meyer's got a lot of learning to do in this realm of the sport. Again, these are the pros. This is not college. In college, it's a lot easier. You could see I talked about it yesterday on the podcast, when they were up in the game winning and had been doing really good driving down the field and decided to run a flea flicker against guys who have some of the best pass rush in the NFL. Not a good time for it. It was a bad call. It might work in college when you have everybody on your team, especially if you're at Ohio State, 90% of your team is better than what's on the other side. Doesn't work that way in the NFL. We'll see how Urban Meyer develops himself. So Lawrence, you've got rookie quarterback who came from college, and you've got rookie coach who came from college, but he's also been on the sideline of coaching for several years now. So you take those and you adjust it in there. Lawrence, he'll be fine. He's going to be a good quarterback. We've seen the intangibles. The problem is when you get a guy like Fields, okay, I thought in the beginning it was best to throw him in. If you're going to be an average team or below, which is what the Bears were going to be with whatever quarterback they started this season, I thought that Fields should get in there. However, I've taken that back. And even when I listened to Alex Smith, I don't know if some of you heard him talk the other night before the game, it's rough on these quarterbacks. If you come in and you don't have the talent around you to make things happen, especially in offensive line. Now, the Bears have a running back and a number 1 NFL receiver in Robinson, but you can't just have those 2 things. You've got to have an offensive line, and you got to be able to have some better play calling. I don't think the Bears did a very good job, and most people don't either. There's a lot of fire Nagy out there, but come on, the guy's the head coach. He knows what he's doing. They didn't seem very prepared for that game in a way. They kind of prepared as if Andy Dalton was the quarterback, as if they had a vet as the quarterback who was going to make veteran decisions, and that didn't happen. So, but people you got to temper your expectation. I've been saying this about Jones. I've been saying this about Hurts, Lawrence. I said it about Allen. Josh Allen, man, I was so grateful in Dynasty when I had watched him throw the ball in the Senior Bowl. I actually watched a lot of his tape, but I had watched him throw the ball specifically in the Senior Bowl, and I saw some of his passes, and I went, that's it. And when I got to draft him in Dynasty, which I got him like 8th overall that year in Dynasty, I was ecstatic. And the kid is going to be, he's good. And some of these other kids, they might fall off, but they need the fan support. They need the backing of the fan base. They're going to have tough games. They're young. This is a man's sport that comes with a profession that you need to know the ins and outs of every play, and what every player is supposed to do on every position. Mac Jones is getting sacked right now. I said this would happen. You could see it in the preseason. He was making checks to get himself lit up. So was Justin Fields. They were making checks on the offensive line. It's part of the quarterback's job, and there's so many things going on at quarterback. Reading the field, setting up your line right, reading the blitzes, reading what play is coming at you so you can make better decisions. Jones, Fields, Hurts, Lawrence, it's going to take some time. Now Tua's on the sideline. He's not getting those reps. He's not getting that time to make himself better. So just temper your expectations. Your team, unless you have the situation that Justin Herbert walks into, and don't get me wrong, Justin Herbert deserves the credit that he's getting, but he walked into a great situation. He walked into a team that was ready to win. These other teams, they didn't walk into teams that were ready to win. I'm sorry, but the Patriots, people are looking at them because they were so great for so long, but they are depleted in their weaponry. They really are. The receivers, when Aguilar is your top receiver, number one receiver, and you got Jacoby Myers, these guys, they're good receivers, but they wouldn't be number ones on any team in the NFL. That's just how it is. The reason Aguilar was on number one on the Raiders last year is because they had two young rookies who were learning the game. And as soon as they learned the game, look what happened in the offseason. The Raiders said, we're ready to roll with these guys, and here we go. Now, the Raiders, or the Patriots, they're going to have to get some weaponry around Jones. And with that complicated of offense that they run, with all the checks and the line, there's a lot of checks into the line as well that Jones is going to have to know and learn and read. It's just going to take time. These guys have to have the playing time to get it done. So don't judge so soon on these guys. Don't hate on your own team because one of these guys is your quarterback. It's going to be the way that it is. Now, moving into the next thing, we're going to talk about this Thursday night matchup, which we've got two of these young quarterbacks, one in Lawrence who's struggling, and one in Burrow he's been showing out since he's been playing so far in the league. He's one of the phenom guys. He's got the Dan Marino sense in him, just like Herbert. So here we go. How's this team, this game? I don't think it's going to be super exciting. I think the Bengals, I know it sounds funny, but I think the Bengals, because they've got experience in the coaching staff, and I know Urban Meyer, I just don't trust it yet. I think he's learning on the fly as well. I think it's going to be a Bengals game. Obviously, we love this game. It's the NFL, so most of us will be watching just to see some of these quarterback play. And obviously, here we looking at this like our fantasy outlook, right? So fantasy outlook, Trevor Lawrence, I wouldn't be too hot on. The Bengals have been shutting down QBs. The Bengals have been shutting down QBs. They've been shutting down. Their defense has shown out. I thought the defense, I came into this going the Bengals would be well last in their division. They've proved me wrong so far early on in the season. There's a long way to go. Now, I don't know. I think James Robinson, you might get a touchdown out of him. Who knows? Marvin Jones has been consistent. He's the only consistent receiver coming out here at Jacksonville. Shark has had his moments, but not consistent. Chenault, he's been banged up with his shoulder. Didn't make much of an impact this last week, even though he practiced all week and played. Right now, they're tight end. Hurts, you're not looking at any points there, but nobody's throwing that guy in, and he might be the shock or surprise of the game. I don't think Dan Arnold he might, get in small percentage this week after the trade from Carolina, but he's not going to be a factor this week, in my opinion, coming on a Thursday game. The guy's only been there for 2 days. I don't think it happens this week for him. He may be somebody to look at down the road, though. I think he got a bigger role going to this Jaguars team, and Urban Meyer and this staff looked at that and probably said, we need some help in that department. They need a good, Dan Arnold is an all-around tight end. He can block and chip and then get out and catch. He's got that in him. So that was probably a really good pickup from them. And then moving to the other side, I think Joe Burrow has a great night. Obviously, the Jaguars defense kind of came to play a little bit against the Cardinals. However, I think the Cardinals had a little lackadaisical after their big game last week, and coming into this game playing the Jags, and they traveled to Florida, and they just, it was one of those games where they started out sluggish and then they came on towards the end. Of course, the Jaguars helped them do that with an interception touchdown off the stupid flea flicker. However, Joe Mixon, I think he gets his yards. Joe Burrow looks good. Higgins is doubtful right now. Now, he wasn't practicing Tuesday. I have not, as of the filming and recording of this, have heard if he is practicing today, but it looks seriously doubtful as of yesterday. He wasn't even participating in dress, didn't do anything on the side, was not even a partial participant in practice, so I can't see him suiting up tomorrow night. So you're going to have Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd. They'll be the guys getting it done on the receiving side for the Bengals. CJ Uzama, maybe. You never know. He's not a consistent tight end, but this could be one of those games where he sneaks a touchdown or a big play. But if you're stuck with him at your tight end and you've had to pick him up off the waiver wire, you were probably already in trouble at tight end anyway, so what the hell, you throw him out there. Now moving into the lines here, I have this game, you got finishing Bengals 30, Jaguars 17, and I think that's where it ends up. On the spread, you've got the Bengals are minus 7.5 points, so obviously I've got the Bengals covering the spread in my score. I also have the plus-minus, which is 46 going into the day. I have that as also covering by a point. So it's going to be close, but I have that covering. Now, the money line, you're looking at Cincy at a minus 350. I don't want nothing about that. I don't want to touch it because you never know. That's just too much for me on one side. Jags, though, plus 280, you might put a little bit in there. You might put a little bit in there and hope. That's a big, plus 280 get you some bucks if you're playing it right. So what the hell? You might throw a little money down, little, and hope that they come away with the win. These guys, this stuff is tough in the NFL. You never know how these guys are going to go breaking it as far as sports betting. So it's, look at it how it is. But again, I have the Bengals covering the spread. I have the plus on the plus-minus side, and I have the Jags. Throw a little money down just in case the miracle happens and they pull this one out, or the Bengals do one of those backward slides that they've done in previous years. Different coaching staff, different quarterbacks, but you never know. Sometimes if you look at the Chargers, they have so many games that they blow, and it didn't matter who was the coach. Quarterback. I mean, last year Herbert was a quarterback, but they continued down the same path. This year they beat the Chiefs. However, they've had heartbreaker already early in the season of a game they should have won, and then they lose. So who knows how this is going to play out or happen? But here's your lines. Looking at it right now, like I say, I've got the spread beat. I've got the plus on the plus-minus side, and if I was going to throw money down on a team that was, you could maybe, since it's a Thursday night, you could get a little upset happening and you want to just put a little cash down, nothing big. You throw some money on the Jags, maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. So looking at this, you've got to realize that the Jags, I don't know how it plays out tomorrow night. Urban Meyer is worrying me with his college-style coaching coming in. That's not going to get it done. He's improved since week one. The team's improved since week one. It just worries me because I still see some worrisome things out there that he's making play calls and decisions based off things that he probably would have done in college, and it's just not going to get it done in the pros. And that's where we're at. So with today's episode, this is where we're finishing up. We've talked about what we needed to talk about. We've had a good time. I appreciate you guys. And don't forget, follow at Gridiron Grubb on Twitter. Subscribe here to the YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Over on Apple Podcasts, give it 5 stars. You're greatly appreciated. We'll see you for tomorrow's episode where we talk about a little bit of other things, and we'll get into more games coming up for the weekend, and that's where we're going to be at mostly for Thursday and Friday's episode is breaking down and forecasting those games. So don't forget, hit the subscribe, follow on everything else, and other than that, peace out.